Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the podcast you come to when you're finally ready to take fantasy hockey seriously. My name is Nibbelink. I'm the creator of Apples Ginos, originator of the Zero-G draft strategy, and in this show, I am going to talk about some of the biggest hotshots and have-nots of the last couple of weeks. Let's get it. Now, unfortunately, I do not have my best friend, your friend Blake Kramer, here with me this evening. He is just away from the podcast, doing work things once again. This work schedule has changed a bit for both of us this year, and so unfortunately, we are not able to be together as much as we would like. But I'm still here. I'm in a good mood regardless. I am going to go 5-0 across all of my leagues this week, so that's lifted me up even in the absence of Blake here. Hopefully you listening to this are coming off a similar week. Yeah, I'm starting to feel like I'm in a pretty good place across most of my leagues. I'm moving into first in my $100 Cats League. I am maintaining first place in the Cacuffle Tier 1 and moving into, I think I'm going to be in third place after this week in the Content Creators League. Keeping pace there. Blake's in first there, so good for him. Fourth place in the, we call ourselves Experts Keeper League that I run. And then it's just the tier 1 of the APL that's giving me problems. I'm going to go to 4-9 here with my win, but yeah, it's been a tough go there for sure. Some mistakes were made, and there'll be some good learnings from that league for sure this year. I'm still going to give it a go, but I think things would have to go absolutely perfectly for me from here on out for me to make the playoffs. But we're going to give it our darndest, and it all starts this week, right? 5-0 week, feeling good at the moment. Hopefully you are as well. Well, let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into some Newsies. Off the top, Tom Wilson fell kind of awkwardly after taking a hit. He just kind of like took a seat after taking a hit there on Saturday, and his right foot kind of buckled under him a little bit. I think got pinned up against the boards a little bit. Left the game with a lowy body injury, as I'm sure they called it in the press conference afterwards. But Carberry was quoted, Spencer Carberry, the coach, was quoted as saying, "I don't think it's too bad." So hopefully we'll get some more updates. Sounds like we should on Monday. Lexi Protas is also day-to-day in doubt for Monday's game, so pay attention to that one if you got Protas in your lineup. PLD, Pierre-Luc Dubois, has resumed skating, but it does sound like he's not close to a return. This is all part of that 3 to 4 month timeline that started in November, so still some time to go there before we can expect to see him in a game once again. Over in New York, JT Miller was at practice in a non-contact jersey on Sunday. Adam Fox was taking his usual spots, power play 1, top D pair, so expect to see Fox probably in the next game here for the Rangers. Seth Jones did miss Sunday's game against Colorado, is considered day-to-day. He has an appointment on Monday that apparently should give the team a better idea of the injury, and Paul Maurice was kind of declining to say anything further until they have the results of that appointment. So for now, day-to-day, but still some potential that we could see something else moving forward. Over in Colorado, the injury ward is growing, unfortunately. Devon Taves goes feet first into the boards on Saturday. Gabe Landeskog fell into the goalpost at full speed, appeared to take it in the ribs. Both are going to, quote, miss some time, according to Coach Jared Bednar there. That's not what you want to see for either of these players, especially you got to feel for Landeskog. Just wanted this guy to have a fully healthy season after going through what he's been through just to get back into the league. But it sounds like both will miss some time, so make plans there. I guess maybe some potentially better news than we might have anticipated. Mackenzie Blackwood is considered day-to-day. The hope is that he will be ready to go by Thursday. We had heard that he was going to be reevaluated after missing some time, but it sounds like they are expecting that that should go well. John Klingberg missed Saturday's game, also missed Sunday's practice. Lower body injury there. No further details, but something to monitor. Obviously, he's been fined for those managers who have found John Klingberg on the wire this year, and he's been contributing heavily to that San Jose offense. In the meantime, I believe I should have double checked this before I started talking about it. Yeah, it was Dmitry Orlov on power play 1. So if we do get some more news, I guess, on Klingberg, that's going to be a bit longer term, then you could look at Orlov for some extra points on the San Jose blue line. Sean Monahan remains out, didn't play Sunday, but Columbus is hoping that he can return on the upcoming road trip, according to the beat reporter there. I believe it was Portsline. If not, it was Mark Sheik. Both do an excellent job. Love the Columbus beat reporters there. And that means somewhere within the 4 games that the Columbus Blue Jackets play this week, they have a 4-game road trip all week, basically. So we'll have to see where that goes. But hopefully Monahan is getting closer to a return. And lastly here, the Vancouver Canucks have offered Kiefer Sherwood a deal, but nothing has gotten done. I have to wonder if there's a trade coming here. And I also think it would almost certainly be a hit to Sherwood's value. Just in my mind, there are pretty few other places Sherwood would get the minutes and the power play opportunity that he sometimes gets in Vancouver. He spent a decent chunk of time on power play 1 in Vancouver throughout the year. So, maybe there's a perfect situation he goes to where he is actually playing with better line mates, 5v5, and it is a better situation for him for fantasy. I'm just guessing that it's going to be more of a 16-minute role. He's averaging 17.5 on the season so far, and that number has crept up as Vancouver has gotten, let's call it, less deep at forward. So, yeah. I think that, unfortunately, it might be a bit of a tick downward for Sherwood if he does get dealt here. So something to watch for those of you with Sherwood on the roster. All right, that's it for the Newsies. Let's get into some hot shots. Off the top, we got to talk about Austin Matthews and his sudden resurgence. Matthews has played 4 of the last 5 games for the Leafs. He has 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points in those 4 games, skating almost 21 minutes a night. He ranks 3rd in shots per 60, 2nd individual expected goals for per 60, and 33rd in on-ice expected goals for per 60. Now on pace for a 47-goal, 77-point campaign if he were to play all 82, which of course he can't anymore because he's missed some time. On the season, 6th shots per 60, 7th individual expected goals for per 60, 63.5% IPP, 14.4% shooting percentage, 13.3% on-ice shooting percentage. The IPP in particular is low here for Matthews, and that's why I do think that there is still 90-plus point Matthews as a rest of season pace available to us here with 50, 55, best case scenario, 60 goal pace rest of season. It really does look like he's feeling it, though. He's making the power moves. Seems like the feet are moving a lot more. I do think Berube has allowed the Leafs to play with a bit more pace and a bit more offense, carry the puck a little bit more instead of just dumping it into some random corner and hoping that they'll miraculously get the puck back. So all good signs for Austin Matthews. I would be treating him much closer to the beginning of season projection that I had for him than I have at any point throughout the disappointing season that has been for Matthews. Brock Nelson is the next one we got to talk about here. He's been getting some time on that top power play in Colorado, and he's been hot. Not even necessarily a result of the power play, but just in general, he's been doing quite well for himself, rather. Before today's game, he had 4 goals, 7 points in his previous 5 games, skating over 20 minutes a night, 133rd in shots per 60, but 34th in individual expected goals for per 60, and 28th in on-ice expected goals for per 60 is Brock Nelson. He was playing with Nichushkin and Lehkonen. If Landeskog is going to miss time here, though, you have to wonder if they kind of reshuffle the lines a bit. Who goes up to play with McKinnon? Probably Lehkonen again. And so Nelson could be getting a little bit of a hit in terms of the 5v5 line mate there. But all that to say, Nelson is doing really well as of late, in a great position to succeed, tons of minutes. 37 goals, 66-point pace on the season for Nelson. He's running really hot with a 21.7% shooting percentage, but I do think the point pace is pretty sustainable, so maybe the 37 goal pace comes down a bit. Maybe it's more towards the 30 goal mark, but I do think that this 66-point pace is actually not out of the realm of possibility, especially if he continues to get the 20-minute treatment. Next up, Corey Perry, got to talk about here. He's cropped up a couple times throughout the year, a couple goals, 6 points in his last 5, over 13 minutes average time on ice. LA has been doing some stuff with their power plays where they've been basically splitting the power plays. Kempe on one, Fiala on another. Basically all you need to know, 1A, 1B situation. And Perry's been on the one that's produced the most in the last little bit. And he's still, he's going to have good rate stats. It's just those minutes that are hard to really get behind in terms of fantasy value. But he is 54th in individual expected goals for per 60 over that 5 game span, and 109th in on ice expected goals for per 60, 22 goal, 51-point pace on the season for Corey Perry. I think he's interesting as a streamer this week, but only in a deeper setup. Probably not your standard 12-team league, but anything a little deeper than that. And I think Corey Perry is definitely in play alongside guys like Fogle, Moore, anybody in that range. If you're looking at potentially rostering them this week, you should also be looking at Corey Perry and just hoping he stays hot for another 3 games here for you to get all those off nights that LA has. Over in Pittsburgh, before the game here today, which I don't have in front of me, I don't believe I saw anything. Maybe Mantha got an assist here. Should have double checked before I started talking about it, most likely. That's what an experienced podcaster as myself should probably have done. Mantha did pick up an assist here. Brazo didn't get anything. But it is a spot where both Mantha and Brazo entering today's game had 4 goals and 6 points in their previous 5 games. Neither are getting big minutes. Mantha just under 13.5, although he did skate a little bit more today at 15:23. Most of that with the power play, or not most, but a good chunk of that with the power play, so that's probably why it's a little bit higher than the close to 13.5 minutes he'd been averaging previously. Brazo is down around 12.5 over the last 5 games. But the underlying stats are pretty good here for both players. 37th shots per 60 for Mantha, 39th for Brazo. 59th individual expected goals for per 60 for Mantha, 68th for Brazo. And we have to expect Malkin is skating. There's not a real definite timeline going on with Malkin right now, but non-contact sweater skating. When Malkin returns, you think that they'll probably try to reunite him with Mantha and Brazo. He had a good run with them there. If that happens, and especially if Mantha can stay on the top power play and get Malkin back as his center, I do think that there's some potential for Mantha to retain some fantasy value. Brazo has missed more time, so it's a smaller sample, but he's on a 38-goal, 63-point, 82-game pace, while Mantha's on a 29-goal, 57-point pace, and Mantha hasn't missed any time. So that's a bit more representative number for Mantha there, and I tend to think that this isn't too far out of the range for Mantha, especially if we do get Malkin back here, as I mentioned. So that's something to keep an eye on. It might not be, consistently rosterable as a guy who just stays in your lineup for the rest of the season in a lot of leagues, but it might be a guy that's at the top of your list for streamers when Pittsburgh has a good schedule. All right, let's move on to the defenders here. And interesting situation with the Columbus blue line here, where you had a couple of guys entering the game today who were piling up points. Damon Severson, 1 goal, 7 points in his previous 5 games before today. Then Matejchuk, 2 goals, 6 points in his previous 5 games. Matejchuk picked up another couple of assists here today. Severson skated 21:14 today. Matejchuk 25:01. There was some OT time there, so keep that in mind. But big minutes for both players, and that's obviously going to be pretty interesting. They're really leaning on the top 4 of Severson, Matejchuk, Werenski, and Provorov, and really kind of downgrading the contributions of Fabro and Christensen as their other 2 defensemen there. And that's leading to some potential for guys like Matejchuk and Severson. Severson's average time on ice before today was just under 20 minutes. Matejchuk up at 25.5. That'll probably come down a little bit with Werenski back in the lineup, you would expect. But at the same time, Matejchuk still getting big minutes as of today, so that's good stuff. The on-ice expected goals for per 60 for both players is very high, 24th for Severson, 21st for Matejchuk. Severson also 21st in shots per 60 amongst all defensemen in this 5-game stretch, while Matejchuk's down at 91st. But pretty interesting stuff. Just guys that I didn't really think I would be looking at to roster this year. But Matejchuk had a pretty big prospect profile, and so that's the one I'm particularly interested in, especially since he's been getting even more minutes. And the on-ice numbers are pretty consistent. I will say Severson 29th amongst all defensemen in on-ice expected goals for per 60 on the season, not just in this latest hot stretch. He's on a 35-point pace, where Matejchuk's on a 40-point pace on the season. So both players probably a lot better streamer option than anybody was giving them credit for. A couple more defensemen here to round it out. I do want to talk about Bowen Byram for a second. 3 goals and 6 points in his previous 5 games, just under 25 minutes average time on ice. Now, you could say that this might just be a situation where Byram's really got some extra time. Like, there was a game where Dahlin missed, and so is most of that just due to, a game where he was the only guy available? But that's not really the case. He did skate 27 minutes, 52 seconds in that particular game, so yeah, that was a contributing factor. But his lowest time on ice for any of those 5 games was 22 minutes, 21 seconds, and the next lowest was 24 minutes, 18 seconds. So he is legitimately getting huge minutes here for the Buffalo Sabres, and obviously they've been pretty good as of late, so it's not a bad spot to be. 86th shots per 60, but 5th in individual expected goals for per 60 and 36th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. That's something you really can't ignore here for a guy like Byram, now on an 18-goal, 41-point pace on the season, and he ranks 25th in individual expected goals for per 60 on the season amongst all defensemen. I think he is going to be a tough guy to roster consistently, just because he does do a lot of this by efficiency, and so he's got a bit of that Shane Gostisbehere effect that we had with Gostisbehere for so many years this year. Obviously, Gostisbehere's having a tremendous year, but a lot of previous seasons, Gostisbehere would go through long stretches where he wasn't doing anything, and it was hard to hang on to him. I think Byram will probably have those, especially with Dahlin back, but at the same time, I think there might be some stretches where Buffalo has a good schedule for even a couple of weeks where you want to hang on to a guy like Byram and just let it play out over the course of a couple of weeks. You might actually be pretty happy with what you get out of a guy like Bowen Byram. We have to talk about Darren Radish to close out the hot shots here. 4 goals, 7 points in his last 5 games, 3 of those coming on Saturday. Absolutely nuclear game. Hat trick for Darren Radish. Crazy stuff. He is 11th in shots per 60, 19th individual expected goals for per 60, 25th on ice expected goals for per 60 in the last 5 games, skating over 24 minutes a night. Obviously on the top power play, he's played 35 games this year, has scored 34 points for an 80-point, 82-game pace. On the season, 10th in shots per 60, 12th individual expected goals for per 60, 4th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. Had an interesting conversation with some of the patrons in the patron-only Discord channel today about Darren Radish and where you would place him rest of season. And yeah, I do kind of view him as rest of season likely to be a top 10 fantasy defenseman. I don't think that's too crazy to say. He's definitely been running hot, 28-goal, 82-game pace. That's largely due to a 14.8% shooting percentage that's not going to stick around. The IPP is super high at 63%. I don't think that's going to stick around either. But at the same time, I do think that Radish can sustain a really good chunk of this and produce at a 60-plus point pace rest of the way. When Nikita Kucherov is feeding you and you are the number 1 shooting option on a lethal Tampa Bay power play, I do tend to think that you can sustain a pretty high amount of production. And I do think that the most likely scenario at this point is that when Hedman comes back, Radish will get some fewer even strength minutes for sure. But I do think that he maintains the top power play just given how lethal he's been there basically whenever he's gotten a chance this season. All right, before we move on to the have-nots, I'm going to quickly talk about the Apples and Ginos Patreon. Supporter tier, $2 a month gets you Apples and Ginos Patron League eligibility. We'll put you on the wait list for now and get you in there if we can, if someone abandons a team. The $8 per month tier gets you that Apples and Ginos Patron League eligibility. Also gets you access to the aforementioned patron-only Discord channels, where I do a lot more talking with the patron members, and Blake does as well. It's just, obviously there's less people in there, and it's a lot easier for us to see it, and we definitely try to talk to everyone that's in there. There's a $15 a month tier where we guarantee that we will answer any question that you have, but we will definitely do our best to anyone who's posting in the patron-only Discord channels as well. Access to patron-only live shows is another perk at the $8 a month tier. Also gets you access to show notes, including the show notes for this show right here. It also gets you access to the Apples and Ginos player evaluation tool. And that's something you got to get in your life. You got to see stuff like Jason Robertson's player card. Still can't believe that he was left off Team USA. Just truly unbelievable stuff. Canada just scored in the World Juniors. I'm feeling good. Let's keep it going, though. Let's talk about some have-nots. Off the top, we've got to talk about Chris Kreider. Guy I've had some interest in throughout the year here, but he has gone on a pretty significant cold stretch here. No points in his last 5 games. Despite getting some pretty good ice time, actually it's his last 6 games with no points, and he hasn't scored a goal since December 1st, over a month since Chris Kreider has scored a goal. His individual metrics have really fallen off as of late. That's obviously concerning for a lot of reasons. Just a guy who should be, he is still a member of the top 6 there, playing with McTavish and Seneca in the last game. Has been demoted to the second power play unit now, is still killing penalties, which makes me think that probably it's not an injury-related issue, but for whatever reason, Kreider cannot generate anything right now. 300 in shots per 60, 263 in individual expected goals for per 60, which is usually a metric that Kreider shows up pretty well in. In fact, he still ranks 52nd amongst all players in individual expected goals for per 60 on the season. So it's really only this last stretch where it's really kind of tanked for him. I don't know really what to make of this. I think that probably it gets better at some point here later on, but right now it's truly terrible. I don't think you have to hang on to Chris Kreider right now, but I do think that he's still a great player, and I still think that there's a good chance that this turns around, as long as it's not, injury related or something like that. Carter Verhaeghe next up. He's got no points in his last 5 and did not get anything in the game today, so you can extend that for an extra game. It's now actually 7 straight games with no points for Verhaeghe, and he hasn't scored a goal since December 17th. So definitely there was a time where Verhaeghe was, he started the season terribly cold, then popped off for a hot minute, and now he's terribly cold once again. Averaging just over 16 minutes, actually skated only 13 minutes and 43 seconds against Colorado here today. 215 shots per 60, 164 individual expected goals for per 60, 334th in on ice expected goals for per 60 in the last 5 games is Carter Verhaeghe, which is just terrible. Obviously not on the top power play. Still playing on that line with Marchand and Bennett, which, theoretically, that should be a terrific place for anybody to play. But Verhaeghe is making it look really tough right now. I have found Verhaeghe to be one of the most puzzling players this year. I thought it would turn around, but I've just kind of been generally steering clear of him. He's been dropped. He was dropped early in the season in one spot, and it was just a spot where, it didn't make a lot of sense based on my streaming schedule and everything else, the number of ads I had left in the week, and everything else that I needed to make happen to, try to secure the win for that week. And so I didn't pick him up there, and I was kind of kicking myself because it was not long after that he went on that hot streak. And then he's gone ice cold since then. So it's a really tough scenario for Verhaeghe. I wish there was better stuff in the underlying numbers to suggest that things are going to turn around. But it seems like the ice time is going down as well. So yeah, really, really tough call on Verhaeghe here. I do think you could drop him if you had to, but at the same time, I could see the argument for hanging on to him just because of playing with Marchand, who's been on another level this year. If that changes, though, then it starts to look really, really tough for Verhaeghe to get it going again. Nazem Kadri next up, just 1 assist in his last 5 games. A tough spot to be a Kadri rosterer, which I am in one spot. No goals in his last 6 either. Dates back to December 18th for his last goal. 19 minutes average time on ice still, but the shots are way down, which is usually a calling card for Kadri. He's down at 235th rather in shots per 60, 169 individual expected goals for per 60, 201 in on ice expected goals for per 60. 16 goals, 64-point pace now for Kadri. Still on the season, he ranks 36th in shots per 60. I have to wonder at this point. I mean, he's rocking a 6.6% shooting percentage, which is just hilariously low. And Kadri's not exactly an efficient shooter, but he's definitely a guy who should be well above double digits. It's just a spot where I have to wonder, with everything that's gone on with Calgary, although they've been winning more, I have to wonder if Kadri isn't hearing stuff about his name being out there in trade rumors. I wonder if that's affecting him at some level. You always wonder as well when stuff like this is happening about the possibility of, just some kind of underlying injury, a little bit nicked up, something that's maybe preventing him from shooting, or it hurts when he shoots, or something along those lines. It's not impossible either. So there's a lot of ifs, cans, coulds, or buts about what's going on with Kadri right now. The Flames are not that far out of a playoff spot. They're 3 points out of a playoff spot with an extra game played, but they would have to climb 6 teams basically to get into the last wild card spot. I have to wonder if the possibility of being traded isn't weighing on Kadri at this point. I don't know, but it's a possibility you can't ignore, and obviously we know Calgary struggles to score goals most of the time, and now it's affecting Kadri as well. I do think he'll be back, but it's something I'm monitoring now. If this continues, where at least the shot, I want to see the shots come back, basically, is my sign of life with Kadri that I'm looking for. I haven't dropped him yet. I'm not really planning to, unless this week also goes pretty badly as well, and then I'll reevaluate after that. But at this point, I'm still hanging on to Kadri because I do think he can be rosterable in a lot of spots, even just on the basis of the shots. Roope Hintz, next up, 1 goal in his last 5 games before the game today. And he did pick up an assist today, played 1903, customary power play and shorthanded role. In these previous 5 games, just under 18 minutes average time on ice, 207th shots per 60, 104 in individual expected goals for per 60, 20th in on ice expected goals for per 60, so obviously a good number there. 27 goals, 71-point pace on the season, and 7th in on-ice expected goals for per 60 on the season, which is obviously a terrific number for him. He has a 48% IPP on the season, but an 18.7% on-ice shooting percentage. Those numbers are just insane, and I don't know really how to rectify them. I just think that most likely it levels out. He was playing again with Jason Robertson and Maverick Bourque on a line today against the Montreal Canadiens. Couldn't quite get it done, but playing on that line, playing on the top power play, still a good spot for Roope Hintz. I think this is probably mostly some bad luck, maybe a little bit of regression on that on-ice shooting percentage. I think it's mostly bad luck that his IPP is so horrifically low. He's typically been a much more efficient player in terms of his IPP, and so I do think that'll come back and should come back in a pretty significant way. Although a good chunk of that is probably the fact that the power play doesn't need to run through him nearly as much anymore, and it's not. So there probably is some level of IPP reduction that's likely to continue. It's just a matter of how much. So I do think that roughly the 70-point pace that he's on is probably what we should expect rest of season. I don't think that this recent cold stretch is anything to get too concerned about personally. John Carlson next up here. Carlson has 0 points in his last 5 games from the blue line there in Washington. Did have a 5-shot night his last game out, but even with that 5-shot game, he ranks 73rd amongst defensemen in shots per 60 and 109th individual expected goals for per 60, 34th in on-ice expected goals for per 60, which is not too bad. 22.5 minutes average time on ice, but has been supplanted by Jacob Chikrin for that top power play, which is just a situation you're going to have to worry about. Now, with the Tom Wilson injury, if Wilson isn't going to be on the top power play, they did go back to using John Carlson and Jacob Chikrin as a 2D format on that top power play with Wilson out. So that's something to keep an eye on if Wilson does miss time, as Carlson could get back on the top power play, and obviously that would have significant impact on his potential for fantasy. Also, like, he's still on a 17 goal, 63 point pace on the season, and that was kind of always probably going to come down. 13.5% on ice shooting percentage and a 49% IPP, both kind of on the high side there. So I just think that most likely it's a spot where Carlson is due for some regression. We're currently seeing that regression. And also, I'm a little bit concerned about the long-term outlook there with Chikrin running power play 1 when everyone's healthy. If nobody's healthy, then Carlson will probably get more power play time. But if he doesn't, what's the outlook rest of season? Probably not this 63-point pace, probably more in the 45 to 50-point range. Thomas Harley next up here. Just 1 assist in his last 5 games heading into today's game. Did pick up another assist in the game here today. Skated 24-24. Was skating just under 23 minutes in the 5 games prior. 94th shots per 60, 68th individual expected goals for per 60. When Harley was doing really good stuff for fantasy last year, he was generating a lot more shot attempts. And maybe that's a stylistic thing with Glenn Gulletson, but it is a problem for fantasy. I will say he is 22nd in on-ice expected goals for per 60 in those 5 games prior to today, and that's a really good number, 63rd in that metric on the season. On the season, 45% IPP, 12.5% on-ice shooting percentage, 40-point pace. I think that those numbers are probably pretty close to sustainable for Harley. And if he starts to generate a little bit more on his own and get some more shots off and do a little bit more of that, then we could be looking at even more. And obviously with Harley, there's always the chance that he kind of gets that power play 1 for any number of reasons. Probably not through Heiskanen's bad play. He's been amazing this year, but Heiskanen could get injured once again, as he has the last 2 seasons. And obviously Harley would be a fantasy stud if that happened. So I've picked up Harley in a spot where he was dropped. I have Harley in a few spots now. I'd like to continue to hang on to him because I do think that it's just a terrific player who's probably just playing the role that he needs to play for his team to do well right now, but has a lot more offense in the tank if they set him loose. Lastly here, Dougie Hamilton, just 1 goal in his last 5 games. And I had this game today against Carolina, New Jersey, only 1 goal generated, and Hamilton didn't get in on that either. Hamilton is still skating over 21 minutes a night, 2nd in shots per 60 amongst all defensemen in that time span, 25th individual expected goals for per 60, 54th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. On the season, he ranks 3rd in shots per 60, 14th individual expected goals for per 60, and 27th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. 31% IPP, 6.7% on ice shooting percentage. Dougie Hamilton, probably the unluckiest defenseman in the league right now, just based on those metrics and the points that he should have. That being said, it's hard to get excited about anything with the Devils right now. We thought maybe they were starting to get on track, but then things kind of fell apart again. Hamilton doesn't look like a guy who's going to get on power play 1 anytime soon. Luke Hughes there right now. Shimon Nemec has been there in the past over Hamilton. When he's healthy, he might be another contender for that role, and that might actually diminish Dougie Hamilton's even strength role even further. So yeah, there's some tough waters for Hamilton. But that being said, these shots just really do keep me in the mix here. The fact that New Jersey should be better, and they have been a little bit unlucky as well. Not just Hamilton, but a lot of the other players. I do think things get better for Hamilton and the Devils moving forward. It's just a question of how much, right? That's the real question here. And I don't know if anybody knows that for certain at this point. All right, that's it for the have-nots. If I didn't talk about a player that you do want to hear about, make sure you join for the Monday 8:30 p.m. EST live stream of Puzzling Players. You can ask live comments in the YouTube comments section, and I will be sure to get to as many of those as I possibly can As for now, we're going to dig in on a segment we call the environment. And we're going to talk about some goalie environments, some goalies who might be able to surprise us with the situations that they find themselves in. I'm going to be using Mark Barber 18 Skaters expected goals model to talk about a bunch of this. These are all numbers before the games here today for Sunday, so something to keep in mind there. Right off the top, I want to talk about Philadelphia and Dan Vladar. Vladar has had just a tremendous Zero G season, all things considered. 239 goals against average, 910 save percentage, fresh off a 2 goals against performance against the mighty Edmonton Oilers. I think it's just a pretty good spot where Dan Vladar has been good basically all season. He's getting generally 2 out of every 3 starts for the Flyers at this point in time, and why wouldn't he when he's been so good? Philadelphia as an environment, in the last 5 games, they are first in 5v5 opponent expected goals against and all strengths opponent expected goals against. So they're allowing the least expected goals against of any player, of any team rather, in the last 5 games, and they're second in the season-long stats, both at 5v5 and all strengths. So really, they've just been a terrific defensive environment all season long, and Vladar is obviously benefiting from that, but he's also playing well behind it and doing what he needs to do. I really like that for him. I think that goalies are voodoo, but there's no reason to suspect, based on what we see in the underlying numbers, that Vladar is going to, get any, have any obvious reason for decline in the near future based on these metrics. Philadelphia doing it and doing it right under Rick Tocchet currently. Over in Utah, they are slowly turning things on in terms of their team defense. Third in 5v5 opponent expected goals against in the last 5 games, and 4th in all strengths over that same last 5 games. So really good over the last little bit here. On the season, they are 12th in 5v5 opponent expected goals against and 9th in all strengths opponent expected goals against. Obviously, that's a good sign for Karel Vejmelka. I think that Vejmelka has had his ups and downs. I don't know that he's a superstar goaltender in his own right, but this is a pretty good spot for him, and I think he's going to continue to get a bunch of volume there. I do like Vejmelka rest of season. Over in Pittsburgh, they are 4th in the last 5 games before today's game in 5v5 opponent expected goals against, and 3rd in all strengths. Really good stuff over the last little bit. They've really been turning it on as of late and getting better. On the season, they are 19th in 5v5 opponent expected goals against and 15th in all strengths. Really, this just means that for both Skinner and Shilovs, it's a good environment, especially currently. I think you have to be interested in what's going on there. Shilovs didn't have the best outing against Columbus there, but you have to also, I think it's probably the most likely scenario is still that it's going to be a 50-50 split. Right now, it might be a good week. Skinner is going to probably get the next start. I believe Pittsburgh, they don't play again until Thursday here. So if you can get Skinner in for that start, then he's also going to get one of the back-to-backs on the weekend, so you can get a couple starts out of Skinner, maybe even get an early week stream in, then turn to Skinner for the end of week. Wouldn't be a bad way to do it. And Pittsburgh is kind of caving people in a little bit at the moment, and so that's something to take note of. I'm obviously not trusting my entire fantasy season to Stuart Skinner, but I am interested in any goalie that has as good a defensive environment as Pittsburgh has exhibited over the last little bit. Over in Anaheim, they're 9th in 5v5 opponent expected goals against over the last 5 games and 14th in all strengths. On the season, they're much, much worse. 28th in 5v5 opponent expected goals against and 24th in all strengths opponent expected goals against. So obviously, this is just about Lucas Dostal here. I've seen him dropped, and that's definitely a possible scenario where Dostal doesn't recover. Goalies are voodoo, as we'll continue to say, but I do think that Dostal turns things around. I think Anaheim is learning how to play better team defense, and Dostal will be better as a result of that once he gets himself turned around here. So something to keep an eye on there. If Dostal does get dropped in your league, I would be pretty interested in him moving forward. He's a clear volume goaltender on a team that looks to be playing a little bit better defense. Needs to figure out the scoring to match it and, to just consistently win minutes. But this is a spot where I think the team defense is improving, and theoretically, that should mean a better scenario for Dostal moving forward. And lastly here, Ottawa, over the last 5 games, 11th in 5v5 opponent expected goals against, and 9th in all strengths. On the season, though, they are 5th in both 5v5 and all strengths opponent expected goals against. It's just a good situation for Levi Merlainen, and a spot where we don't really know when Ullmark is going to be back. Merlainen has won his last couple starts here, allowed 3 goals against Washington on 29 shots, allowed 2 goals against Winnipeg on 23 shots, and it's not going to be an easy week. He's got Detroit, Utah, Colorado in the next 3 games here. You expect that he'll get 2 out of those 3 starts here, most likely. It's not an easy spot, but it's a spot where I'm pretty interested to see what's going on with Merlainen, especially because he's likely to get 3 starts this week. If you're in a relatively forgiving points setup where, even if he does allow some goals, he'll still probably get you some net positive points. Then in a 3-game week, I am pretty interested in Merlainen, especially since Ottawa has been a pretty good defensive team. They're a little bit down off their season-long stuff in the last 5 games, but overall I expect that to rebound a bit, and Merlainen should be a beneficiary moving forward for as long as Ullmark remains out. All right, we're going under the hood next. We're going to talk about a guy named Nick Robertson. Now, I got to caveat this a little bit. I'm not convinced that Nick Robertson is going to be a guy that is going to be fantasy relevant in many of the more standard leagues in the next little bit or anything. But I did want to shout out the underlying numbers that we're seeing here, especially in the context of the Leafs and their prospective offensive turnaround that's happening right now. Over the last 10 games, Robertson is skating only 12 minutes 39 seconds average time on ice, but he does have 3 goals and 8 points in that span. He's 17th in the league in shots per 60 and 13th in individual scoring chances for per 60. In the last 5 games, he's got all 3 of those goals, plus another 3 assists for 6 points, and he ranks 6th in shots per 60, 5th individual scoring chances for per 60, 25th individual expected goals for per 60, and 49th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. He's on a 19-goal, 42-point pace on the season with a 71% IPP, 13.2% shooting percentage, and 11.8% on-ice shooting percentage. I am not convinced that we are going to, I don't think that Robertson is necessarily likely to get some 18-minute rule anytime soon. But Robertson is also a guy that I want to highlight just because, to me, he kind of has the imprint of a guy who could go to a low-end team. Like, if you just put him on the wing of, like, Celebrini tomorrow and put him in San Jose in a spot where Chernyshov has been obviously doing terrific stuff, I wonder what Robertson could do in a scenario like that where he wasn't looking over his shoulder at a coach like Berube every time he makes a little bit of a mistake. I do think Robertson has his, he has a lot of spots where he overhandles or mishandles the puck, and that draws coaches' ire, but he is a terrific shooter and a good offensive mind, and I think that it's just a spot where I do expect that if Robertson ever gets a true opportunity, I don't think that's likely to happen on the Leafs, but if he does get moved in the future, I just want to put the pin in the name right now. I think we could get like a Ryan Donato kind of season where he pops off and has like a 30, 35 goal season in the right place at the right time. I just think that's probably a possibility for a guy like Nick Robertson, given these underlying numbers. And I do think that he's streamer level already in Toronto, even with these crazy low minutes, because it looks like they're in a spot where they are looking at just giving their offensive players a little bit more freedom to do what they do best. All right, enough about the Leafs. Let's talk about the head-to-head streamer Deathmatch. Unfortunately, Matt Zuccarello absolutely obliterated my Jackson Blake stream. Even though Blake had an extra game played this week, he had a goal in the first game of the week and then did pretty much literally nothing afterwards. Anyway, Blake wins this one. I'm still up 7-4, 7-4 with one tie on the season, so still feeling pretty good. This week upcoming, Blake's got Mason Marchment. I've got my guy Luke Evangelista, and we'll see how that goes. Well, if you've made it this far, you should probably click the link in the description. Join the Apples Ginos Discord community. Lots of managers in there ready to talk fantasy hockey all day and all night with you. If you can, like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever you're able to do for this video or this podcast, wherever you're listening, that really does help us out. Canada just scored. It's 4-4 late in the third. I am going to go watch this, but that is going to be all that I've got for this episode. Hopefully it brought you some value. Helped you get a little bit better at Fantasy Hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick and 18 Skaters. Many thanks to Matt Creamer for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to get in here, get into Fantasy Hockey. We're in the home stretch now. That's it, folks. Much love.